Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. The heavyweight contender Luis King Kong Ortiz isn't taking too kindly from words from Deontay Wilder of a rematch with Tyson Fury. Now Wilder, he'd announced that he would be fighting Luis Ortiz next, and then in subsequent days he announced he would also be facing Tyson Fury after that, saying that while he wasn't looking past Ortiz, a rematch with Fury was done. And while he says he's not looking past Ortiz by announcing a rematch with Tyson Fury, that it's pretty much a done deal, that is actually kind of looking past Luis Ortiz, and that's the way that Luis Ortiz seemingly is feeling about it. So he told Boxing Scene, "I'm not sure why he is so confident that he's going to walk through me. I plan to finish what I started and bring that title back to Miami. Our first fight, he got lucky, but that won't be the case in the rematch. I'm sure he plans to do the same. Unfortunately, he needs me to cooperate for that to happen," which quite frankly was run out of gas. So if that's his game plan, then he's in for a rude awakening, because the circumstances surrounding the reasons for why I ran out of gas in our first fight have all been addressed and corrected. If there is already a deal in place to fight Fury in 2020, I have no problem replacing Deontay Wilder's name with mine on the contract, assuming, of course, Fury wants to face the winner of our fight, which will be me. That's Luis Ortiz's statement to BoxingScene.com. And confidence indeed. You would expect that from Luis Ortiz, who's looking at this fight going, I had Wilder in trouble in that first fight, I ran out of gas, couldn't get the job done, and ultimately got stopped myself. I guess there's a few things to sort of pick up from those statements, and then I want to get onto some other thoughts around this whole thing. But I'll start with some of what Luis Ortiz is saying there, because he's putting it all down to he ran out of gas. But, I mean, that does sort of, forget the fact that he was caught with the right hand earlier in the fight before he actually had Deontay Wilder in trouble. And effectively, what was it, the fifth round? He was saved by the bell there. So if that had have gone longer, he probably would have been stopped, halfway through that fight before he got a chance to hurt Wilder. And I think, people look at some of these statements by Luis Ortiz that he says he's going to beat Wilder, but what's he going to do different? And you have to remember, the guy is now 18 months older. He's not going to get any better. If anything, he's going to be probably worse than he was the first time around because, Father Time is undefeated. And I think we have seen signs from Luis Ortiz that, he has been slipping even from the Wilder fight. That Christian Hammer fight recently in March, that wasn't a great performance. And Christian Hammer was having a lot of success with his right hand in that fight. But to say that he's addressed the things that, helped him run out of gas, I mean, does that mean that he didn't actually have, proper cardio or, whatever he was doing in training, he wasn't actually doing it properly? I mean, can he actually increase his stamina even more? I mean, the whole thing about running out of gas there was, well, he emptied the tank. He had Wilder hurt and he went for broke. I mean, a lot of fighters sort of end up suffering from that in a fight. When they have someone hurt and they really unload, their armory on the other guy, they just run out of gas. It's a physiological thing too. It's not just for Luis Ortiz. A lot of fighters suffer from this. We've seen other fighters like Anthony Joshua against Vladimir Klitschko. He got excited thinking he could get Klitschko out of there partway through their fight. It took him rounds to recover. And after that 7th round barrage, Luis Ortiz, he, obviously did need rounds to recover too, but he couldn't get his legs back under him. So I just don't know if he is going to have any more gas in his gas tank for a second fight. Arguably, he's probably going to be worse than he was for his the first fight. I mean, just physically, because he's getting older now. I don't think he's going to be any better. And remember the first time around, there was the whole issue with he was taking blood pressure medication. And there was, it emerged after the fight that, a doctor pre-fight wasn't sure that Luis Ortiz should actually be allowed to continue with that fight. Ultimately, it did go through and Ortiz nearly came up with an upset. I just don't know if he can really put on a better performance. I think arguably Deontay Wilder in a second fight, he's fought Ortiz, he'll be more comfortable, more relaxed, he'll know what Ortiz is about, and Wilder's the guy who's in the prime of his career, whereas Ortiz is clearly, to me, on the slide now. He may not be sliding fast, but he is sliding. I think we've seen that in the Hammer fight, maybe a bit in the Travis Kaufman fight. But I understand, his comments against Wilder, the whole looking past him, that I'd feel aggravated about that too, because he's effectively saying that, I'm going to run through you like nothing, and then on to the fight that I really need to settle, which is with Tyson Fury. And we know Wei wants to fight Tyson Fury too, because that is pretty much the only fight in the heavyweight division that is going to increase Wilder's worth and value, to really get him on a sort of a par with an Anthony Joshua, to get the sort of money he's looking for. And, you can't discount the fact, I guess, that there could be an upset with the Luis Ortiz, but at this point, I think Wilder would go into it as a heavy favourite. But it's also got me thinking some of the sort of, different statements in recent days. Why didn't they announce this rematch after Deontay Wilder's fight against Dominic Breazeale? Because you may remember, Luis Ortiz was in there, in the ring afterwards, and he was interviewed by Jim Gray, and it was all a little bit confusing because it didn't really sort of lead to anything, and, Ortiz couldn't say much. Deontay Wilder didn't comment on Ortiz, and it kind of looked like Ortiz was in there. He looked a little bit silly. He'd sort of been ignored. It was like a little bit sort of head-scratching what had happened. But then effectively a week or 10 days later, the rematch is announced. So why wouldn't you just announce it then? But maybe part of that is Wilder was saving it to announce it in Anthony Joshua's fight week. Take a little bit of a shine away from Joshua's first fight in the United States. And then also he announces that he's going to be fighting Tyson Fury again after Luis Ortiz. That's also in Joshua fight week. So it's, Wilder's done a good job here of trying to take some of the attention away from Joshua and his fight with Andy Ruiz Jr. And, it's a pretty clear and obvious tactics, but it's also been effective at the same time. But I guess the question is now, you're getting a bit of attention for this, but is that going to translate into a decent pay-per-view? Because it's clear that a Wilder and Ortiz fight is going to be on pay-per-view, because I think to pay Luis Ortiz anything near the $7 million that he would have got for fighting Anthony Joshua, and remember they turned that down and accused Joshua and his team of lowballing them, ultimately coming back and saying, no, it wasn't a lowball. But Ortiz's promoter, Jay Jimenez, had said publicly that they'd been promised effectively the same money or similar money for another fight, and that fight could have only been a Deontay Wilder fight. And if you're going to pay Ortiz somewhere around $7 million, which, I'm doubtful he would get that in a Deontay Wilder fight, you're going to have to pay Wilder as well. And Wilder's, demands for a purse, given he's turned down these other massive offers, and he's been told he can get effectively the same in a deal with Showtime or whatever, he would be getting the lion's share of the purse. So you have to wonder how much would be left for Luis Ortiz. But even in a pay-per-view, what are they going to guarantee? Because I actually don't know how much interest there is going to be for a pay-per-view. If this was a regular Showtime fight like the first time, I think you could say the interest would be quite high, because Luis Ortiz, even though he might be sliding a little bit, is still one of the better heavyweights in the division. He's still got some currency. His name is worth something in the division. But on a pay-per-view for a fight we've already seen, for a guy that Deontay Wilder's previously knocked out, a guy who is 18 months removed from that former title shot, and he also has now turned 40 years old. It's not exactly selling itself the same way that the first fight did when Ortiz was unbeaten and 38 years old. And it's not exactly like fans have been demanding the rematch over anything else. I think we would have rather seen other fights, but it's not a bad fight, but I just don't know how commercially viable or successful it will be on pay-per-view. In the United States, that is. Because if you're talking $75 to see Deontay Wilder knock out a guy who he's already knocked out, and it's probably not as good as he was the first time around, the actual sales pitch isn't strong. But, it remains to be seen. But I can see why Luis Ortiz is a little bit salty at Wilder in some of his statements. He's planning to rectify whatever he thinks was wrong from the first fight in his gas tank. We shall see. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.